So a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to check out the Realme GT Master Edition. And if you don't know what the smartphone is all about, I encourage you to check out the video I made above going over my first impressions with the smartphone. But I thought in this video, I test out the performance aspect of the smartphone and give you also a bit of an idea of how the battery life on the smartphone is and how the battery would perform on a typical intense day use case scenario. Now, as far as the specifications of the smartphone go, you're looking at the Qualcomm Snapdragon 778G 5G chip alongside 8GB of RAM and up to 256GB of storage. So in terms of, the general performance on paper, it's looking like a good phone. And to start off this test, I've also made sure that the Realme GT Master Edition is at 100%. So by the end of the video, we'll be able to tell how much of a drop in battery life we've seen over the 1.5 hours to 2 hours of use that I'm going to put into the smartphone. We're starting off with AnTuTu benchmark, where the smartphone scores just above 540,000 points, which is incredibly impressive. On Geekbench 5, more of a CPU-driven benchmark, you get a 790 single-core score and a 2,697 multi-core score. These again are impressive and high-end values, and we're capping off these benchmarks with 3D Mark's wildlife stress test, which basically tells you how good of a smartphone is when it comes to, prolonged performance. And as you can see from the results, we're getting a consistent 99.3% stability rate, which means performance can be sustained on the smartphone for a very, very long time. Although those are synthetic benchmarks, what about real-world games? I took some popular titles, starting with Asphalt 9. This is a racing game that I've grown up with, and I've made sure that the settings were set to high quality. You'll be able to see that the game performs pretty well, although I didn't think it was pushing well above the FPS rate to make it a nice and enjoyable experience. I thought it was pushing maybe about 40 FPS, although you could say that it was going all the way down to 30 FPS, and I can tell this visually from the fact that I've used many high FPS performing monitors and sort of experiences. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to set up an FPS meter for testing this extensively, but I'm sure this snippet gives you a good idea of what the performance might entail on the smartphone. There was nothing laggy about the experience and nothing deal-breaking as such, but I just wish there was an option for at least a 60 FPS smoother mode that would have just made sense for a racing game of this caliber. Next up, we've got PUBG. In the settings, there is no smooth and extreme option, so this is the setting that I played the game at. I'm getting into gaming tests a lot more frequently now as I get my hands on newer smartphones, so if you have anything specific or any specific settings you'd like me to try on any game, definitely let me know in the comments, because that way I can implement those into future videos to make for an overall more useful experience. But this is basically what PUBG looks like. I feel like the overall FPS here is bouncing between 45 to 50 FPS just from the experience of having played this game at a higher frame rate before. In more intense battles or gunfights, things do get a bit choppier, although I'm hoping the phone gains support for smooth and an extreme option, because that way the game just feels a lot more polished, a lot more smoother, and I think with that people are going to enjoy it a bit more, especially on the 120Hz display that you find on the Realme GT Master Edition. Perhaps the most difficult game to play without flagship specifications is Genshin Impact, and here performance is evidently choppy. Even moving around causes lag, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a frame rate below 30 at times, especially when in combat. There are huge lag spikes, and overall the results in pretty much any circumstance are unplayable. So I think if you're looking to use this specification combo for heavy gaming, especially for this game in particular, I might not advise that. Rounding up on the test, we've got one more game, which is Call of Duty Mobile. These are the settings that I used when testing, and just like on any other smartphone when playing Call of Duty, it feels like this game is the most optimized. I would say a frame rate between 55 and 60 is what you can expect here, with it dipping to the high 40s in certain use case scenarios. But I think Call of Duty works hard to make sure its game is optimized for as many configurations as possible, and this is just another example of that. Being able to play at such a high frame rate as well as maintain graphics is a good enough achievement for the smartphone, but I wish with the other games sort of giving you a limited experience, Realme as well as all of these game developers could look to make the overall experience on the GT Master Edition just that bit better. What is extremely impressive is that despite such an intense gaming session, the smartphone's thermals remained on point, only going up to around 40 degrees Celsius, which I think is because of the material used on the back of the smartphone. And this also reinforces the stability score that we saw at the start of the test. Also, with all of the testing over, it's nice to see the battery percentage of the smartphone stick at 75%. And if you remember, we started at 100%, so about 1.5 hours to 2 hours of gaming led to a 1/4 or 25% depreciation in battery. But I think that's about it for this video. I hope you guys found it useful, and if you did, a comment and a like would be very much appreciated, and do subscribe for more videos coming very shortly. This was Vaibhav, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios!